The taser's blue sparks danced inches from my face, its crackle a venomous hiss in the stifling air of my Savannah home. "Talk, or I'll light you up," roared Sergeant Victor Malone, his bloodshot eyes wild with a hatred I knew too well. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of a lifetime facing men like him, men who saw my black skin and decided I was less than human. At 42, I, Lena Carter, stood pinned against my own wall, drywall dust clouding my vision, my hands raised, my voice steady despite the threat. "You're making a mistake, Sergeant," I said, my words a quiet blade. His sneer widened, but before he could act, the room seemed to hold its breath, as if the world knew what was coming. How had a peaceful morning, spent carving a mural for my neighborhood, spiraled into this? I'd woken early, the Georgia sun barely cresting, my hands already shaping a cedar panel for a community art project, a mural to honor Savannah's Gullah heritage, a gift to the kids I mentored at the local youth center. My denim overalls were speckled with paint, my braids tucked under a bandana, and my mind was lost in the rhythm of chiseling. This 1,600 square foot Victorian, bought 4 months ago, was my haven, a place to escape my DC job's relentless pressure. I was no stranger to high stakes, but here, I could create, not just survive. The doorbell's harsh buzz shattered that peace, insistent, like a warning. I set down my chisel, frowning. Nobody dropped by unannounced. My mentees knew I guarded my weekends, and I hadn't yet connected with neighbors. Brushing cedar shavings from my arms, I opened the door to find 2 officers. Malone, a hulking figure with a face carved from contempt, and Officer Rachel New, a rookie whose wide eyes betrayed her unease. Malone's gaze raked over me, his lip curling as if I were filth. "What's this, squatting in a place like this?" His voice dripped venom, the word squatting a deliberate jab at my race. My stomach twisted, but I'd faced this script before growing up in Atlanta. I'd dodged cops who patrolled our block like conquerors, their eyes branding me a threat at 12. "I'm Lena Carter, the homeowner," I said, my tone even practiced. "I'm working on an art project. Can I help you?" Malone snorted, his badge glinting like a taunt. "Homeowner? This Victorian's worth $500,000. You expect me to buy that?" The racism was blatant, a punch to the gut, but I held his stare. "I have the deed, registered with Chatham County," I offered, nodding to a drawer nearby. "Check it." He ignored me, stepping inside uninvited, his boots scuffing my hardwood floor. Nguyen hesitated, her hand hovering near her radio, her face a mix of doubt and duty. "We got a call," Malone barked. "Suspicious woman, breaking in, trashing the place. That's you, isn't it?" He glanced across the street, where a neighbor's blind snapped shut, and I realized someone had seen me, a black woman, paint splattered, and dialed 911. The betrayal stung, but I'd learned long ago to channel hurt into focus. "Sergeant, you're in my home without a warrant," I said, my voice firm. "That's illegal. I'm asking you to leave." Malone's face darkened, his jaw clenching. "You don't give orders, girl," he spat, the word girl a calculated slight, stripping me of dignity. He prowled my living room, kicking a stack of cedar planks, sending a paint can clattering. Nguyen flinched but said nothing, her silence a different kind of wound. I thought of my mother, a nurse who'd faced slurs from patients yet never wavered. "Hold your head high, Lena," she'd said. I did now, but Malone's presence was a storm, and I sensed it building. "What are you hiding?" he growled, leaning close, his breath sour with coffee and rage. "Stealing art supplies. Running a scam." The accusations were absurd, but his eyes gleamed with a predator's thrill, a man drunk on power. I'd seen that look in boardrooms, in courtrooms, in the mirror of my own doubts, a look that said I didn't belong. But I'd clawed my way to a place where I defined my worth, and I wouldn't let him steal it. "You're crossing a line, Sergeant," I said, my voice low, a warning. "Every word you say is on that body cam." I nodded at the blinking red light on his chest, then at Nguyen's, her fingers twitching nervously. Malone's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. "You think a camera scares me?" he hissed, his hand snapping to his taser, the device humming with menace. My pulse quickened, memories flooding back of a high school teacher who'd called me trouble for questioning a grade, of a boss who'd assumed I was the intern, not the lead. Each slight had forged me, but this was different. Malone wasn't just dismissing me, he was rewriting my existence, casting me as a criminal in my own home. Nguyen finally spoke, her voice thin. "Sarge, maybe we should verify the deed." Malone rounded on her. "Zip it, Nguyen, you see her face. She's guilty of something." His words were a blade, cutting through reason, and I saw Nguyen shrink, her loyalty to protocol warring with her fear of him. Malone turned back to me, his taser raised, sparks flickering. "Last chance. Confess, or you're getting a taste of this." My mind raced not to fear but to purpose. The mural I was carving wasn't just art. It was a bridge to Savannah's youth, a way to show them their history mattered. That mission grounded me. "You're digging your own grave, Sergeant," I said, my voice cold, unyielding. "This won't end how you think." My defiance was a match to his gasoline. His face contorted and he lunged, slamming me against the wall. Pain seared my back as drywall crumbled, dust choking the air. Nguyen gasped, stepping forward, then freezing, her indecision a silent betrayal. Malone's taser hovered closer, its threat a heartbeat from reality. I thought of my mentees, kids like Jamal, who'd told me last week, "Miss Lena, you make me believe I can be somebody." I wouldn't let Malone erase that hope. "Your actions are being recorded," I repeated, my eyes locked on his. The challenge he couldn't ignore. Malone's rage boiled over, his free hand gripping my shoulder, pinning me. "Who do you think you are, talking to me like that?" he roared, his voice cracking with fury. I saw the man behind the badger bully, whose power came from fear, whose hatred was a shield for his own insecurities. I'd met men like him my whole life, each one a test. My father, a carpenter, had taught me to build through the chaos, to create when others destroyed. "You want to know who I am?" I said, my voice steady, a fire kindling within. "I'm the woman who's going to bring you down." The words were a vow, and for a moment Malone's eyes flickered with doubt, but his pride was a beast, and it roared back, his taser inching closer. Nugent's radio crackled, a faint voice cutting through, but she ignored it, her face pale. The room was a powder keg, and I knew the next move could ignite it. My smartwatch, a discreet gift from a colleague, pulsed faintly against my wrist, a silent alarm I'd triggered when Malone crossed my threshold. Help was coming, but would it arrive in time? For the 25 to 55-year-olds reading this, my story is yours, the sting of a co-worker's your so well-spoken jab, the fear of a traffic stop turning deadly, the exhaustion of proving you belong. I'd carried those burdens since I was a girl, each one shaping me into someone who could stand here, taser or no taser, and refuse to break. Malone's hatred was a mirror of a world that too often judged me before I spoke, but my mural, my mentorship, my fight, they were my defiance. As the taser sparks lit his twisted face, I held on to that truth, ready for whatever came next, knowing this moment wasn't just about MIT, it was about every soul who'd ever been told they weren't enough. The taser's electric hum was a living thing, its blue sparks snapping like a cobra poised to strike, inches from my cheek. Sergeant Victor Malone's grip on my shoulder tightened, his knuckles white, his face a mask of rage twisted by something, deeper fear perhaps of a world where his authority could be questioned. My back pressed against the crumbling drywall of my Savannah home, the dust settling on my braids, my heart a steady drum despite the chaos. "You think you're untouchable," he snarled, his voice low, venomous, each word a blade meant to cut me down. I, Lena Carter, 42, a black woman who'd carved a life from resilience, met his bloodshot eyes with a calm that unnerved him. "You're the one who's trapped, Sergeant," I said, my voice a quiet thunder, carrying the weight of every injustice I'd faced. The air in my living room was thick, charged with the unspoken truth that this moment wasn't just about MIT, it was about every person who'd ever been reduced to a stereotype, every soul told they didn't belong. Officer Rachel Nguyen stood frozen near the door, her young face pale, her hands trembling as they hovered near her radio. Her silence was a wound, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes, a crack in the armor of duty that Malone exploited. This wasn't how I'd imagined my Saturday, a day meant for chiseling a Gullah mural for Savannah's youth, for mentoring kids like Jamal who dreamed beyond the barriers society built. Yet here I was, pinned in my own home, fighting not just for my dignity but for the hope I'd promised those kids. Malone's taser inched closer, its sparks grazing the air near my jaw, and I felt the heat of his anger, a fire fed by years of unchecked power. I'd seen men like him before, my first boss at a DC law firm, who'd smirked when I presented my analysis, saying, "Didn't expect that from you." The cop who'd trailed me through a store at 16, assuming I'd steal. Each encounter had sharpened me, taught me to wield composure like a shield. But Malone was different, a storm of prejudice and pride, his hatred personal yet universal. "Confess," he barked, his free hand slamming the wall beside my head, sending another cloud of dust into the air. "What's your game? Scamming this neighborhood? Stealing from honest folks?" The accusations were absurd, a script written by his bias, but they carried the weight of a system that too often believed them. I thought of my father, a carpenter whose hands built homes while his heart endured slurs, teaching me to stand tall. "I'm not hiding anything," I said, my voice steady, cutting through his noise. "But you're hiding plenty, aren't you? That badge doesn't cover your fear." The words struck a nerve, his eyes narrowing, a flicker of uncertainty. Betraying the bully within. Nguyen shifted, her boots scuffing the floor, her voice barely a whisper. "Sarge, we should call this in. Something's off." Her words were tentative, a lifeline thrown into a raging sea, but Malone's head snapped toward her, his glare venomous. "Stay out of this, Nguyen. You want to be a hero. Look at her." Written all over his dismissal of her was a mirror of his dismissal of me, and I saw Nugent's jaw tighten, her conflict roar. She was young, maybe 24, caught between loyalty to her partner and the nagging truth that this was wrong. I'd mentored kids her age, seen that same struggle in their eyes, wanting to do right but fearing the cost. "Officer Nguyen," I said, my tone firm yet kind, "you know this isn't justice. You can stop this." Her eyes met mine, wide with fear, but Malone's roar drowned out any response. "Don't you dare talk to her," he bellowed, shoving me harder against the wall. Pain flared in my shoulder, but I didn't flinch. I thought of the mural, its Gola symbols half-carved, a testament to a culture that survived centuries of oppression. That legacy fueled me now, a reminder that I was more than Malone's target. I was a builder, a mentor, a force he couldn't erase. His taser pressed closer, the sparks now a breath from my skin, and I felt the room shrink, the stakes rising with every second. Malone wasn't just a man. He was a symptom, a product of a system that let men like him thrive. I'd read the 2023 reports: Black Americans stopped by police at 3 times the rate of whites, their lives too often reduced to statistics. Malone embodied that disparity, his badge a license to terrorize. Yet I saw the cracks in his armor, his trembling hand, the sweat beading on his brow. He was afraid, not of me, but of what I represented, a challenge to his world, where power was his birthright. "You're nothing," he hissed, his voice cracking, betraying the lie he told himself. "Nobody's gonna care what happens to you." The words were meant to break me, but they only sharpened my resolve. I thought of my mentees, their dreams, fragile yet fierce, and I knew I couldn't let Malone's hatred win. "You're wrong," I said, my voice rising. A fire kindled. "People care, and they'll know exactly what you've done." I nodded again at his body cam, the red light a silent witness, and saw his eyes flicker with doubt, quickly smothered by rage. Nugent's radio crackled again, a dispatcher's voice faint but urgent. "Unit 12, confirmed status." She reached for it, but Malone's glare stopped her cold. "Ignore it," he snapped, his focus back on me. "You think you're clever, huh? Playing the victim." He leaned closer, his breath hot, his taser now grazing my collarbone, the electric thread a heartbeat away. My mind flashed to a moment years ago, testifying before a Senate committee, my voice steady as I exposed corruption in federal agencies. That strength surged now, a well I'd drawn from countless times. "I'm not your victim, Sergeant," I said, my words a vow. "I'm your reckoning." The audacity of my defiance stunned him, his hand faltering for a split second, but his pride was a beast and it roared back. He shoved me again, my head knocking against the wall, stars bursting in my vision. Nguyen gasped, stepping forward, her hand on her radio now, her voice trembling. "Sarge, stop. This is too far." Her plea was a spark, but Malone's fury, that was a wildfire, consuming reason. "You're done," he growled, his taser pressing against my chest, its hum deafening. "Nobody threatens me." His eyes were wild, a man unhinged by the idea that a black woman could challenge him. I saw the boy he might have been, raised on lies about superiority, now a man whose identity hinged on control. My heart ached, not for him, but for the world that shaped him, a world I fought to change every day. I thought of the youth center, where I taught kids to carve their stories into wood, to claim their space. Jamal's latest piece, a ship symbolizing freedom, sat unfinished in my workshop, a reminder of why I stood here unbowed. "Your actions have consequences," I said, my voice low, a promise, "and they're coming for you." My smartwatch pulsed faintly, the emergency signal I'd triggered when Malone entered my home still active, a lifeline I trusted. Malone's face contorted, his taser trembling, and I knew he was at the edge. One wrong move, and this could end in tragedy. Radio crackled louder, the dispatcher's voice insistent. "Unit 12, respond." She clutched it, her eyes darting between me and Malone, her conflict a storm. "Sarge, we need to report this," she urged, her voice stronger now, a crack in her silence. Malone's head whipped toward her, his rage redirecting. "You questioning me, rookie?" he spat, stepping toward her, the taser still raised. I seized the moment, shifting my weight, my eyes locked on his body cam, knowing every second was evidence. "You're losing control, Sergeant," I said, my voice cutting through his chaos, "and everyone will see it." His head snapped back to me, his taser swinging wildly, and I braced myself, my mind racing to my mentees, to the mural, to the future I refused to let him steal. The room was a pressure cooker, Nguyen's radio a ticking clock, my watch a silent hope. Malone's hatred was a tidal wave, but I was a rock, forged by decades of standing against it. For the 25 to 55-year-olds reading this, my fight is yours. Exhaustion of proving your worth, the fear of being misjudged, the fire to rise anyway. I'd carried those battles since childhood, each one a lesson in endurance. Malone's taser was a symbol of a world that too often tried to silence us, but my voice, my purpose, was louder. The mural I carved was more than art, it was a declaration that our stories, our lives, mattered. As Malone's taser hovered, I held on to that truth, ready for the storm to break, knowing I wasn't alone in this fight, and that justice, however delayed, was coming. The taser's crackle was a heartbeat in my ears, its blue sparks a flickering thread against my chest, but I, Lena Carter, stood unyielding in my Savannah home. My eyes locked on Sergeant Victor Malone's contorted face. His rage was a storm, but beneath it, I saw the flicker of a man unraveling, his power slipping through his fingers like sand. "You're nothing," he spat, his voice hoarse, the words less a command than a plea to convince himself. My back ached from the drywalls, bite, dust clinging to my braids, but my resolve was iron, forged by decades of facing down men who thought they could define me. Officer Rachel Nguyen hovered near the door, her radio crackling with a dispatcher's urgent voice, her hands trembling as she wavered between duty and truth. I'd warned Malone his actions were recorded, that consequences were coming, but he was too far gone. His pride, a wildfire consuming reason, yet I felt a shift, a pulse in the air, as if the world held its breath. My smartwatch, its silent alarm triggered when this nightmare began, was my lifeline, and I knew help was near. "You asked who I am, Sergeant," I said, my voice low, steady, a blade cutting through his chaos. "I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Justice. I'm the woman who holds rogue officers accountable, and you just crossed a line you can't uncross." The words landed like a thunderclap, Malone's eyes widening, his taser faltering for a split second. In that moment, I wasn't just Lena Carter, the artist mentoring Savannah's youth. Carving a Gullah mural for Hopi was a force, a reckoning for every injustice I'd sworn to fight. Malone's face twitched, confusion battling his fury. "You're lying," he hissed, but his voice cracked, betraying doubt. He stepped back, the taser still raised, his hand shaking now, sweat glistening on his brow. I saw the man behind the Baja bully whose world was built on control, now facing a truth that shattered it. Growing up in Atlanta, I'd learned to read men like him, their bravado unmasked for fear. My aunt, a civil rights marcher, had taught me to stand tall. Her stories of facing tear gas and batons a fire in my soul. "No lies, Sergeant," I said, my tone calm but unyielding. "You thought you could intimidate me, erase me, but I'm the one who investigates corruption, who brings down those who abuse their power, and you're on camera." I nodded at his body cam, its red light a steady witness, and saw his eyes dart to it, panic flickering. Nguyen's radio crackled louder. "Unit 12, report immediately." She clutched it, her face pale, her eyes darting to me. Then Malone. "Sarge, we need to respond," she urged, her voice stronger, a spark of courage breaking through her fear. But Malone's gaze was locked on me, his world unraveling as my words sank in before he could retort. The air exploded with sound-screeching tires, the sharp slam of car doors, a cacophony that shook the quiet Savannah street. Malone froze, his taser dropping an inch, his head whipping toward the window. I didn't need to look. I knew what was coming. 5 black SUVs, their sleek forms unmistakable, blocked the road, red and blue lights flashing beneath their grills. 10 FBI agents in tactical vests poured out, moving with lethal precision, their black sunglasses glinting like armor. The lead agent, a woman with a sharp jaw and a scar tracing her cheek, led the charge, her presence commanding, a storm of authority. The front door, left ajar by Malone's intrusion, burst open with a kick, and the agents flooded my living room, their movements silent, practiced, a ballet of power. The scarred agent's eyes locked on the scene, Malone's taser against my chest. Nguyen's frozen stance hand, her expression hardened to ice. "FBI, drop the weapon. Now," she barked, her voice a whip leaving no room for defiance. Her team fanned out, their tasers drawn, forming a deadly arc around Malone. Nguyen gasped, stepping back, her radio slipping from her hand, clattering to the floor. Malone's taser clattered to the hardwood, his hands rising slowly, trembling. His face, once a mask of rage, crumbled into shock, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The scarred agent moved like lightning, disarming him with a flick of her wrist, while another agent twisted Malone's arms behind his back, cold steel handcuffs snapping shut with a click that echoed like a gavel. "Deputy Director Carter," the lead agent said, turning to me, her tone shifting to relief. "Respect, are you unharmed?" "Ma'am, we received your distress signal." She glanced at my smartwatch, its subtle design belying its power, a tool I'd used in countless high-stakes operations. I nodded, brushing dust from my overalls, my heart steady despite the chaos. "I'm fine, Agent Torres," I said, recognizing her from a joint task force years ago, "but this officer needs to be secured, and Officer Nguyen is a witness." Nguyen's eyes widened, her face a mix of awe and fear, realizing the weight of who I was. The room seemed to still the agent's presence, a wall between me and Malone's fading power. Malone collapsed to his knees, his cuffed hands limp, his bravado shattered. "Deputy Director," he stammered, his voice a broken whisper, as if the title were a foreign language. "You were—" He couldn't finish, his mind grappling with the truth that the black woman he'd dismissed, threatened, was a federal titan with the authority to dismantle his career. I saw the boy he might have been, raised on lies of superiority. Now, a man whose world had crumbled. My heart ached, not for him but for the system that birthed him, a system I'd dedicated my life to reforming. I thought of my mentees at the Savannah Youth Center, kids like Aisha who'd carved a Gullah star into cedar last week, her eyes bright with dreams. I'd promised them a future where their worth wasn't questioned, and Malone's actions were a betrayal of that promise. "You thought you could judge me," I said, my voice low, piercing. But you're the one who's been judged. Sergeant, your actions are evidence and they'll bury you. His eyes met mine, wide with terror, and for the first time, I saw him truly see me not as a threat, but as a force he couldn't comprehend. Nguyen stood against the wall, her hands clasped, her face a storm of emotions, guilt, relief, confusion. I didn't know, she whispered, more to herself than to me. I turned to her, my tone firm but kind. You do now, Officer Nguyen. What you do next matters. She nodded, her jaw tightening, a resolve forming in her eyes. I saw potential in her, a young woman who could learn from this, who could choose justice over complicity. The agents moved with efficiency, one securing Malone, another retrieving his body cam, its footage a damning record. Agent Torres approached me, her scar catching the light, her voice low. We'll take it from here, ma'am. He's done. I nodded, my mind already shifting to the next steps. This wasn't just about Malone. It was about a system that let him thrive, a system I had the power to challenge. I thought of a case I'd overseen last year, exposing a corrupt sheriff's department in Alabama, the satisfaction of seeing justice served. That fire burned now, a beacon guiding me forward. Malone was hauled to his feet, his head bowed, his defiance gone. As the agents led him out, neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, their whispers a chorus of shock and judgment. I saw the woman who'd likely made the call, her face pale, her eyes avoiding mine. The weight of her assumption, of Malone's actions, hung heavy, but I felt no vindication, only resolve. My mural, half-carved, stood in the corner, its symbols a reminder of resilience, of a people who'd survived worse than this. I'd started a new project last month, a digital archive of Gullah oral histories, to preserve their voices for generations. That mission, like my fight now, was about building, not destroying. For the 25 to 55-year-olds reading this, my story is yours, the sting of being underestimated, the courage to stand anyway. Malone's downfall was a start, but the real work lay ahead, in dismantling the systems that empowered him. As the SUV's lights flashed, I knew this moment was a spark, one that would ignite change, and I was ready to fan the flames. The air in my Savannah living room was still thick with drywall dust, but the storm had shifted. Sergeant Victor Malone, once a towering figure of menace, was now a broken man, his wrists bound in steel, his face ashen as FBI agents flanked him. My words revealing my identity as the Deputy Director of the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Justice had shattered his world, and the arrival of Agent Torres and her team had sealed his fate. I, Lena Carter, stood tall, my overalls speckled with cedar shavings, my braids dusted white, but my spirit unbroken. Officer Rachel Nguyen lingered near the door, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and guilt. Her radio silent now, the dispatcher's calls unanswered. The red lights of the FBI's UVs pulsed through the windows, casting shadows that danced across my half-carved Gula mural, a symbol of the resilience I carried into this moment. Malone's downfall was a victory, but it was only the beginning. This wasn't about one rogue officer. It was about a system that had nurtured his hatred, a system I had the power to challenge. My mind raced to the kids I mentored at the Savannah Youth Center, their dreams fragile yet fierce, and I knew this fight was for them, for Aisha, who'd carved a Gula star with pride, for Jamal, whose ship of freedom sat unfinished in my workshop. As Malone was led toward the door, his head bowed, I felt no triumph, only a deep resolve to root out the rot that had brought us here. Agent Torres approached, her scarred cheek catching the light, her voice low but firm. Deputy Director Carter, we've secured the suspect. What are your orders? Her respect was a quiet anchor, grounding me in the chaos. I glanced at Malone, his shoulders slumped, his bravado gone, and saw not a monster but a symptom, a man shaped by a culture that rewarded his prejudice. My aunt's voice echoed in my mind, her stories of marching in Selma, of facing down hate, with unyielding hope. We don't just fight the man, Lena, she'd said, we fight the ideas that make him. I turned to Torres. Secure Officer Nguyen as a witness, I said, my tone steady. Her testimony is critical, and I want a full investigation into the Savannah Police Department's 6 years of records. Every complaint, every arrest, every body cam clip, we're turning over every stone. Torres nodded, her eyes sharp with understanding. Nguyen's face paled, but she stepped forward, her jaw tight, a flicker of resolve breaking through her fear. I'll cooperate, ma'am, she said, her voice soft but firm. I saw potential in her, a young woman who'd stood silent too long but now chose to act. Her decision was a spark, one I'd nurture to ensure she became part of the solution. Gaze lifted, meeting mine, and for a moment I saw the man behind the barge, a man who'd built his identity on dominance, now stripped bare. You can't do this, he stammered, his voice a weak plea. I'm a cop, I was doing my job. The lie was desperate, and I felt a pang of sadness, not for him, but for the countless lives his job had harmed. I thought of a case I'd led 2 years ago, auditing a police department in Memphis, uncovering patterns of racial profiling that led to reforms. That work had taught me the power of accountability, and I wielded it now. Your job doesn't include terrorizing. Citizens, Sergeant, I said, my voice cutting like a blade. You targeted me because of my skin, and that's not a mistake, it's a pattern. One that ends today. His eyes dropped, his body trembling, and I knew he understood the weight of his actions. The career and reputation now crumbling. The agents tightened their grip, leading him out, his boots dragging across my hardwood floor. Neighbors crowded the sidewalk, their murmurs a chorus of shock, some shaking their heads, others filming with their phones. The woman who'd likely called the police stood frozen, her face a mask of shame, and I wondered if she'd ever grasped the harm her assumption had caused. The door closed behind Malone, but the room still hummed with tension. Nguyen stood by the wall, clutching her radio, her eyes searching mine for guidance. I approached her, my tone gentle but firm. You saw what happened, Rachel. You can help fix this. But it starts with honesty. Will you do that? She nodded, swallowing hard, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't stop him, and I should have. I want to make it right. Her admission was raw, a step toward redemption, and I felt a surge of hope. I'd started a program last year, training young officers in de-escalation and bias awareness, and I saw Nguyen as someone who could benefit, someone who could bridge the gap between communities and law enforcement. You'll have that chance, I said, placing a hand on her shoulder, but it won't be easy. Truth never is. She nodded again, her resolve strengthening, and I knew she'd carry this moment forward, a turning point in her career. The front door swung open, and Police Chief Laura Bennett stormed in, her face flushed, her uniform slightly askew, as if she'd rushed from a meeting. Her arrival was no surprise. My distress signal had likely reached higher channels, and the political fallout was already brewing. Deputy Director Carter, she said, her voice tight with panic. I'm horrified this happened in my jurisdiction. I take full responsibility. Her words were rehearsed, a politician's apology, but I saw the fear in her eyes, fear of scrutiny, of losing control. I'd met chiefs like her before, adept at damage control but slow to address the rot within. My mother's wisdom surfaced, her voice clear despite the years. Don't trust words, Lena, trust actions. I stepped forward, my gaze piercing. Responsibility isn't enough, Chief Bennett, I said, my voice cold, deliberate. Sergeant Malone isn't one bad apple. He's a symptom of a deeper disease in your department. How does a man with a history of complaints, of targeting black and brown citizens, not only stay on the force but get promoted? Bennett's mouth opened, then closed, her hands clenching. She knew I'd done my homework. My role gave me access to internal affairs files, and Malone's record was a litany of red flags. The room seemed to shrink, the weight of my words pressing against her. I thought of the digital Gullah archive I'd launched, preserving oral histories to honor a culture nearly erased. That work, like this moment, was about reclaiming truth, about ensuring no story was silenced. As of now, I continued, my voice rising, my office, in partnership with the FBI, will launch a comprehensive investigation into your department. We'll review every citizen complaint, every use of force report, every arrest with irregularities, going back 6 years. No stone will stay unturned, Chief, and if we find corruption, we'll root it out without mercy. Bennett's face paled, her eyes darting to Agent Torres, who stood nearby, her expression unreadable. I will cooperate fully, Bennett stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. I leaned closer, my tone unyielding. You'd better start by delivering all personnel files, patrol logs, and body cam footage by Monday. 8 a.m. Miss a single record, and the consequences will be severe. It wasn't a request. It was a command, backed by the full weight of my authority. Bennett nodded, her shoulders sagging, and I knew she understood the storm coming. As she turned to leave, I caught Nguyen's eye, her face a mix of determination and dread. I nodded slightly, a silent promise to guide her through this. The agents were wrapping up, one securing Malone's taser, another cataloging evidence. Torres approached, her voice low. We'll escort the chief out and ensure the witness is protected. Your call on next steps, ma'am. I nodded, my mind already mapping the investigation, the policies I'd push, the reforms I'd demand. I thought of a new initiative I'd been planning, a community oversight board for Savannah's police, giving residents a voice and accountability. That vision, born from years of watching systems fail, felt closer now, a tangible goal amidst the chaos. For the 25 to 55-year-olds reading this, my fight is yours, the exhaustion of navigating bias, the hope of building something better. Malone's cuffs were a start, but the real victory was the change I'd spark, the systems I'd reshape. As the SUVs pulled away, their lights fading, I stood in my dusty living room, the Gula mural, a quiet witness, and knew this was only the beginning of justice. The stillness in my Savannah living room was a fragile reprieve. The dust of shattered drywall settled, the roar of FBI SUVs now a distant hum. Sergeant Victor Malone, once a looming specter of hate, was gone, his wrists bound, his badge tarnished, by the truth etched in his body cam's unblinking gaze. Agent Torres and her team had departed, escorting Officer Rachel Nguyen as a witness and Chief Laura Bennett, whose polished facade couldn't mask her fear of the investigation I'd unleashed. I, Lena Carter, stood alone, my pink overalls clinging to my frame, my braids still dusted white, my heart heavy yet alight with purpose. At 42, as the Deputy Director of the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Justice, I'd dismantled corruption before, but this was a wound in my own home, a stark reminder of the racism that festered like rot in the systems I'd sworn to reform. My hand found my chisel, its worn handle a tether to my resolve, and I returned to the Gula mural, its symbols stars, waves, linked Hansa, testament to a legacy of endurance. Each stroke was a defiance of Malone's attempt to erase me, a vow to the kids I mentored at the Savannah Youth Center, like Aisha and Jamal, whose dreams I carried like a torch. The mural wasn't just art, it was a bridge to a future where their worth would never be questioned, and I carved with a fire that refused to fade. My thoughts turned to the investigation I'd ordered, a relentless probe into the Savannah Police Department, scouring 6 years of complaints, arrests, and body cam footage to expose the patterns that had empowered Malone. I'd led such audits before in Memphis, where we reshaped training protocols, in Birmingham, where we uncovered systemic bias, but this was personal, woven into the fabric of the community I'd chosen as home. The neighbors' faces, watching from their porches as Malone was led away, lingered in my mind. Some had looked away, shamed by their complicity. Others met my eyes with quiet solidarity, their own stories of bias unspoken. I'd launched a storytelling circle at the youth center last month where kids like Aisha poured out their truths. Her tale of being trailed in a store, her voice trembling yet fierce, had seared my heart. I envisioned that circle growing, inviting adults, officers, even Bennett, to sit and listen, to face the pain they'd ignored. It was a bold vision, a space for Savannah to heal, and I'd make it real, starting with a town hall next month, where voices black, white, young, old could weave a new narrative. I'd already drafted the agenda, a blueprint for dialogue, with Aisha's story at its heart, a call for the city to see itself clearly. The mural's Gullah symbols glowed in the fading light, each one a nod to a culture that had survived centuries of erasure. My digital Gullah archive, preserving elders' oral histories, was thriving, with over 200 recordings uploaded, each voice a thread in a tapestry of resistance. That work, like my role in DC, was about amplifying the silenced. But today had shown me that amplification demanded action. I'd been planning a community oversight board for the police, a panel of residents to review complaints and shape policies, giving Savannah a stake in its justice. The investigation's findings would be its foundation, a catalyst for reform. I pictured Nguyen at that table, her testimony today a spark of courage, her perspective as a young officer vital. She'd stood silent too long, but her promise to cooperate was a step toward redemption. I'd invited her to my officer training program, where she could learn de-escalation and bias awareness, and I saw her mentoring kids like Jamal one day, her badge a symbol of trust, not fear. Her journey, like mine, was about choosing truth over complicity, a path I'd guide her down. My phone buzzed, X notifications flooding in, posts about the incident spreading like wildfire. Savannah cop exposed for targeting black official, one read, with thousands of shares, comments, a chorus of outrage and hope. At Coastal Justice posted, "This is our moment. Demand reform now." Their words a mirror of my resolve. I followed them, their fire fueling mine, and shared my own post today. Hate invaded my home. Let's build a Savannah where justice is our foundation. The response was electric, retweets and likes, a digital rally cry, amplifying voices like Aisha's, like mine. I thought of my aunt, her Selma marches a rhythm in my soul, her worn shoes a testament to endurance. Keep moving, Lena, she said, even when the world pushes back. Her words were a beacon, transforming today's pain into a spark for change. I stepped outside, carrying the mural's frame, and set it on my porch, its symbols a public vow. Neighbors approached, tentative, their eyes on the carvings. "It's powerful," said an older man, his voice thick, his gaze apologetic. "It's for us all," I replied, my throat tight, and he nodded. A bridge built in that moment. I'd launched a new project, a mobile app for anonymous police misconduct reports, linked to the oversight board, empowering those silenced by fear. It was in early stages, but today's events gave it urgency, a tool for Aisha, for Jamal, for anyone whose voice had been stifled. I imagined them using it, their courage a tide rising against injustice. Chief Bennett's promise of cooperation rang hollow, her fear of exposure palpable, but my investigation would hold her accountable. Its truth's a mirror she couldn't escape. I saw her in my storytelling circle, listening to Jamal's dreams, her polished exterior cracking under the weight of reality. It was ambitious, but ambition had driven my career, exposing corruption in Alabama, reforming policies in DC. Nguyen, too, was in my thoughts, her testimony a cornerstone, her potential a light. I'd invited her to my training, and I hoped she'd join, a bridge between badge and community. The sun dipped low, casting the mural in gold, its symbols a promise of endurance. I thought of the 25 to 55-year-olds reading this, their lives marked by the same struggles, microaggressions like "you're so professional," the dread of a biased encounter, the resolve to rise. My story was theirs, a call to act. I urged them to follow at Coastal Justice on X, to read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, its words a fire for change. I urged them to join the Southern Poverty Law Center at sblcenter.org, to volunteer at youth centers, to start their own storytelling circles. My app, my board, my mural were tools, but the power lay in us, in collective will. The town hall was set, a space for Savannah to speak. Residents, officers, kids, Bennett, each voice a stitch in a stronger community. I'd added a new initiative, a scholarship fund for youth center kids, starting with Aisha and Jamal, to fuel their dreams, a legacy of today's fight. Reflecting on my journey, I saw a girl in Atlanta dodging cops' glares, her father's carpentry tools, a lesson in building through chaos. I saw a young lawyer testifying in D.C., her voice shaking but unbroken. I saw a woman facing Malone's taser, her resolve forged by her mother's wisdom, her aunt's marches, her hopes. I'd learned that resilience was a weapon, sharper than any taser, that truth could topple empires of hate. I'd learned that community. Aisha star Jamal's ship, Newgen's courage was our strength, a tapestry woven from shared pain and hope. I'd learned that justice wasn't a single victory but a movement, built step by step, voice by voice. Standing before the mural, I felt whole, my purpose clear. For every reader I ask, if you faced racial profiling, implicit bias, or abuse of authority, how would you approach it to achieve the best outcome? Would you stand, speak, build? Your choice, like mine, can spark a future where justice is a flame, burning bright for all.